Guys, it is July the 21st, 2025, and I hope everybody's been having a wonderful day so far today. I just walked outside and I looked at the thermometer in the kitchen right before I came out here, and it says the real field temp is 104.7. It is so hot out here right now. And I just finished doing yard work, as a matter of fact. When I got finished cutting the grass and walked inside, I took my shirt off, and I was wearing a cotton t-shirt. I could have wrung it out. It was so wet. It must have weighed 5 pounds. I am not kidding. It was so wet from sweating. But I got my grass cut and all that stuff. And while I was doing that today, I was listening to a podcast. And I really don't want to say who it was I was listening to and all that stuff, because I don't want this to get taken the wrong way or something. It really doesn't even have anything, it's not even that important. What is important is what they were talking about, and it was about addiction. And in that conversation, when they were talking about addiction, they started talking about how this individual was talking about how they were drinking like a handle of vodka every single day. And then they started talking about drug usage. And they were saying that, that a lot of the time when they would find themselves using the hard drugs, it was after they had had drinks. And they did have AUD as well, but they were more interested in doing harder drugs. But in their mind, if they weren't using the hard drugs, they were sober, but they could drink. And if they weren't using the hard drugs and they were just drinking, then in their mind, they were still sober. So they would drink often and drink in excess. And that's when they would find themselves relapsing again on the harder drugs, because they had been drinking alcohol. That's what led them to the next step most of the time. And I was thinking about that while I was listening to that conversation. And, I said, I need to talk about this today because it's so true. When we drink, often not only doing like harder drugs or things like that, that's when we get ourselves into trouble, is when we've been drinking. Because, it's one of those things where, I never was, when I started getting older, I stopped playing around with the stuff, the other stuff for the most part, on a regular basis. And I don't want to name any substances or anything like that on here, but I did do some other substances back in the day. And, once I started drinking really heavy, I got away from all of that stuff. But every once in a while, I would find myself using them again throughout my life. It wasn't just something that I did in my teenage years. It wasn't something that I did frequently, but it was something that I would find myself doing occasionally, and it only happened when I was intoxicated. I would go hang out with friends at the bar, and next thing you know, I would find myself in a situation where someone is offering me a substance, and before you know it, I'm taking it. Something that was out of my character. I didn't really do it that often, and for me, it was important. I wanted to get away from that stuff. But every single time that I would go out and I would drink, I'd go to a bar or something, I would bump into somebody, and somebody would offer me something most of the time when I went out. Did I use or take every single time? Absolutely not. Because not every single time that I went out did I get plastered drunk. A lot of times I went out and got plastered drunk, but not every single time. But like I said, it was only really the times that I would get wasted drunk that I would find myself using these other substances and getting myself into these situations, and these are the times too where, I just went out to have, let's say I've told one of my friends or somebody, my brother or something, I'm only going to come out and have a beer or two, and then I'm going home. I can't stay out late. I've got to be at work early in the morning. I would go out to the bar with all intentions in mind, good intentions, that I'm only going to have a couple of beers and then I'm going back home. And what ended up happening is I would start drinking, and then before you know it, I would start feeling good. And then I would have another, and then somebody's ordering shots, and then we've had 5 shots. And then, next thing you know, I'm stumbling through the hallway, just trying to get to the bathroom. And, and then that's when I would find myself in these situations. And these would be the times that, like I said, I only planned on going out and having 1 or 2 beers. And then I would find myself, not even waking up, still awake the next day, 7 o'clock in the morning, the sun's starting to come up, the birds are chirping, and I just spent $400 that night. And I've got nothing to show for it, except for the fact that I feel horrible. And I've got to be at work in an hour. And how am I going to deal with this today? That fear, that anxiety that would come over me, knowing that I had stayed up all night long, and I was wasted drunk too at this period of time, and I've got to go to work. I've got to go work a 12-hour day, and the anxiety that I would feel thinking to myself, what if one of my big bosses decides to stop into the restaurant today? What do I do then? Because my bosses weren't always around. I had area directors that would come by from time to time. And, they would just decide just to pop in, in any random day. They wouldn't say a word. I would, be in the middle of a lunch shift doing my business, and all of a sudden I'd look up and there's my boss walking in the front door with his briefcase. And I'd go, oh my gosh, here we go. It's going to be one of those days today. And the next thing you know, he's back in the kitchen with thermometers, sticking thermometers and everything, pulling all the pans out, looking underneath of everything. It's a very stressful event when they would come in and do that. And I was worried, I've been up drinking all night long. If my boss comes in and finds me in this state, I'm out of here. I'm going to lose my job. And, here I am risking my livelihood because I decided to go out the night before, and I have absolutely no self-control. But my point to today's video is that alcohol leads to so many other things. Think about how many times, let's say that you don't use the substance broccoli, and I hope that you understand what I'm referring to right now. It's the green substance that people smoke. And, let's say that you are somebody who used to use broccoli back in the day, but you don't participate in that anymore. Something that you left in your early 20s or your teenage years. And I'm not saying anything negative about anything, so please don't take me wrong. But, my point is that, now you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever, and you get drug urinalysis, every 3 months or whatever it may be. You go out and, you go out to the bar, or you go to somebody's house and they're hanging out. And next thing you know, somebody's using that substance, using broccoli, and you're drunk. Next thing you know, you decide to hit it, and then you smoke some. Those were the instances. Like for me, I would be worried about getting popping on a urinalysis if they decided to test me. And the only time that I would use broccoli was when I was intoxicated. Have you ever done that before, where you went to somebody's house, went out to a bar, and next thing you know, you're wasted drunk, and then you decide to do that, and before you know it, everything changes, reality shifts, the whole scenery changes, you start getting paranoid, everything starts to spin. You go to your bedroom, all you want to do is go home because you just smoked that and you were already drunk, and it just sets you way off. Somewhere you did not want to end up, but you did it because you were drunk. You weren't thinking properly. If you were sober and somebody offered you that, I haven't done that in 10 years, it's going to, really mess me up. I don't want any of that right now, but you're intoxicated and you're like, yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter. I just had my last drug screen 3 months ago, and it's coming up probably in the next week or two, but I'm going to go ahead and do this. It's because we're not thinking when we're drinking. And alcohol can take us to those places. It doesn't necessarily even have to be even another substance per se. It could be something where you find yourself into some kind of trouble. You get into a situation where you're doing something you're not supposed to be doing. Maybe you go out to a bar and you're hanging out with a bunch of people, and you're hanging out with the work people. You're hanging out with all your coworkers after work one night for somebody's birthday party, or a Christmas party, or 4th of July party, or a Labor Day party, whatever it is. You guys all go out together. These always end up in trouble. I remember when I used to go out with my coworkers back in the day with all the other general managers, there was always something that happened. But you go out, you're hanging out with all your coworkers, and the next thing you know, you find yourself making out with somebody that you're not supposed to be. Things like that just happen. They do. And it's not like you meant to do it. You know, you were wasted drunk. And I'm not making any excuses for any of this kind of behavior at all. So please don't take me wrong. What I'm saying is I'm trying to get this point across that people make really poor decisions after they've been drinking. You know, I don't want to refer to anything that's going on in the media or anything right now, but, you know, people just make poor choices when they drink. And those are the times that people will go out and maybe, you know, have an affair, you know, something that they would not do if they were sober, but in their drinking mind, it's okay. And then they go and ruin their whole entire life, you know, go out to a bar and the next thing you know, somebody sees you doing this and then it gets back to your significant other. And then next thing you know, you're in the middle of divorce and everything got messed up because of alcohol. And I'm not saying that alcohol is completely to blame for this, because it's not, because, you know, we are responsible for the actions that we take. But at the same time, we are not thinking right when we are intoxicated. We're just not. We don't. You know, these are the times that people get in arguments with police officers, and next thing you know, they're getting arrested. Or, you know, you make that decision to get behind the wheel and drive a car after you've been drinking and get into an accident or get pulled over and get a DUI. Or you get into a fight with somebody at the bar. Next thing you know, you get arrested for that. Or you go home and get into an argument with your spouse, and next thing you know, you're in jail for domestic violence. There's so many things that happen because of alcohol. It happens every single day. Every single day. In the middle of this interview I was listening to, they were talking about alcohol, and alcohol, this is just one of the stats they threw out, and they actually put up a graph and showed this, but then every other substance out there times 5. Times 5. Every other substance. It's just absolutely insane. It's insane to me that this substance that's out here is so dangerous, and people just don't realize how dangerous alcohol really is. And not just how dangerous alcohol is in the aspect of our health, but how dangerous it is, you know, based on the decisions that we make after we've been drinking. Because we do. We just make really poor decisions after we get intoxicated. I've spoken about this before. You know, that feeling that you get the next morning when you wake up, especially if you blacked out the night before. You know, you wake up the next morning, you were out at the bar the night before having a blast. You wake up the next morning, you open up your eyes, you go to stretch, you see the sunlight's coming in the window, and you're just, you know, you're stretching out, and the next thing you know, these little memories start to come back, these little flashbacks, and you remember yourself in a position that you probably shouldn't have been in the night before, but you can't remember the rest of it. All you remember is a small little flash of a memory, almost like a picture in your mind, and you remember this thing, and you remember that you were doing something, like I said, that you probably shouldn't have been doing, but that you were intoxicated and you were having a good time, but you can't remember the rest. And all of a sudden, this anxiety sets in, and it scares you so bad. It shakes you to your core because you don't remember what happened. And now you're trying to call everybody that morning, and everybody else that you were with the night before is still asleep. And you're calling, and you've got to get up and go to work that day. So now you've got this anxiety on your shoulders of what did you do last night? Who might have seen you doing this act? And then on top of it, you can't get in touch with the people that you were with the night before because they're all still asleep, and you just want to know what happened. You go to work, you spend the whole entire day, you can't focus on anything because you're worried about what happened the night before, you know, how much you might have embarrassed yourself, how this might just change your life completely because of a decision that you made when you're intoxicated. Man, I'm sweating right now. But a decision that you made while you were intoxicated could completely change your life. And you're thinking this out and playing out all these scenarios in your mind. And you just want to get in touch with these people that you were with the night before. That anxiety that you feel for hours upon hours. When we get sober, we don't have to worry about that anymore. We don't have to worry about being out at a bar and making a poor decision at 3 a.m. and spending $400 that we did not have to spend on some kind of substance that's very dangerous to be messing around with anyway. We don't have to worry about making decisions like that either. We don't have to worry about making a decision, like I said, that could potentially change your life in the worst ways possible just because of one poor decision one night when you were intoxicated. It happens every single day. But when we get sober, we don't have to worry about these things anymore. We don't have to worry about making poor choices like that. And I'm not saying that when we get sober that we don't make bad decisions, because we do. We're human beings. We all, make bad decisions, poor decisions. When we think, we probably should have made this decision, but we didn't go with our gut and made another decision. And then we go, probably shouldn't have done that. But we don't go out and do really ridiculous things most of the time after we get sober that completely could embarrass us. Those are the decisions that we make when we're intoxicated, and it's not even like our mind is even properly working. I mean, you don't even remember what even happened the night before, and then you get in touch with the people that you were with, and they tell you nothing even happened. What are you worried about? It's just so much better to be sober and not have to worry about going through that anymore, not having to worry about, being in a situation that you probably shouldn't be in, and am I going to make a poor decision again? Any of that stuff. After we get sober, our lives just become so much simpler. And I know in the beginning of our sobriety, that simplicity of our life can be kind of boring. It can be kind of agitating. We don't know what to do with ourselves. We're so used to the drama. We're so used to going out to the bar and having a blast and talking about what happened the night before, and I can't believe you got that crazy, and I can't believe you drove, and I can't believe this, and I can't believe that. Our lives become simpler, but the peace that we have within ourselves with sobriety, you can't match it with anything. You truly can't. And like I said, we don't have to worry about that anymore after we get sober. So, like I said, I just wanted to talk about this today, about the poor decisions that we make when we get intoxicated. Alcohol leads to so much else other than just health problems and, maybe being a jerk one night or something. It leads to a heck of a lot more than just that. And like I said, when we get sober, we don't have to worry about that any longer. So, guys, thank you so much for watching today. I truly do appreciate it. And until tomorrow, I will see you all then. Y'all have a great rest of your day. Bye.